Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Red Circle. Also, the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. Also, check us out on Off the Floor. That's our new Discord server. All day long, you can chat with us, chat with other Heat fans. We got 10 different channels, including a draft prospects channel. All kinds of stuff on there. Avoid the clutter of Twitter and go straight to our Discord. $2.99 per month. It's just $2.99 per month. Trust me, once you're in there, you ain't leaving. Check it out. Link is right here on the podcast feed, the YouTube description, as well as pinned to the top of the Five Reasons Twitter page. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. That includes our friends over at Water Cleanup. You can find them at WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. Water Cleanup of Florida, Michael Robert and his team, they do a great job. They're based in Boca Raton. They service the entire area. Get the leak detection for your home or business. Make sure there's nothing going on there because you don't want to deal with it after the fact and deal with the insurance companies. But if something does happen, they are your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop as well. So check them out, WCUFL.com. That's WCUFL.com. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you got the schmutz, they got the guts. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yikes. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all band. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. Check out the recent episodes that we've done. Came back from the All-Star break. Well, before the All-Star break, actually, we did an episode about things that needed to change for the Miami Heat in the second half. We had, well, it's actually the last third of the season, but you guys get the point. Alex, myself, Brady, and Greg were all on that one. But then a more recent episode I did with Brady about a few adjustments tactically that Erik Spoelstra may make after the All-Star break. Now, today, Alex and I are going to look more at the rotation part of this. And I'll throw this at you before we start, because I ran this by Brady, and I asked him, what, in your view, is more important? I'm going to start with this, because I know what's most important to Erik Spoelstra, because I've had this conversation with him many times, and he has said that 75% of his job is ego and player management, essentially. It's the stuff that the fans don't see most of the time. It's making sure everybody's happy with their roles or in the right role. It's the planning of things, all that kind of stuff. But it's the locker room related stuff. So that leaves about 25%. Okay. So I'll ask you, of that other 25%, what in your view is more important for the coach, and particularly with this team? Is it who he plays? In other words, the rotations, the minutes, who he plays them with, all that kind of stuff when we talk about lineup data, etc. Or is it the schemes that he puts them in and the way that he essentially deploys them? I'm curious for your answer, because I got Brady's answer on the last episode.
That's actually a tough question, and I'm glad we're starting off with those. But I think I would probably lean who you play, and more specifically, the just like the right mix of guys, finding the right mix of guys, because you can play certain guys who you feel should be playing, but I think it's going to be about finding the proper combinations, as the season winds down. And, there's of course a lot of layers to this, right? Because, you've got the injuries going on right now. We got Jimmy Butler out right now. And you've got a lot of guys who deserve to be in the rotation. So it's going to be easier said than done, is what I'm saying, to find the right mix of guys. But I do think for this team specifically, that's going to be more important going down the stretch, because I feel like for them, the scheme stuff is kind of stuff that you can work on and has been worked on already. And it's more about just executing it and doing it the right way. But the combinations to me is something that is more pressing for this Heat team.
So that's fair. So if that's the case, you're the right guy for this episode, because Brady went the other direction. He went more with the tactical stuff. Where you both come from on these topics generally, I'm not surprised by what you each chose. All right, so let's get into the rotation here, and let's just make some general assumptions, okay? Bam Adebayo is going to be in the rotation. Jimmy Butler is going to be in the rotation. We know that, obviously. So let's get through a couple of these other guys. Are we to assume Tyler Hero is going to not only be in the rotation, but be a starter for the balance of the season?
Yeah, I mean, until proven otherwise, like we can do a separate conversation if we want to do another one to get through the week about Tyler Hero and what role he should or shouldn't be in. But as of right now, like everything has shown us that he is a starter until again proven otherwise.
All right, so we got 3. Okay. Other core rotation players here for the Heat. Jaime Jaquez has proven core rotation player, correct? Going to be in there somewhere?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Not likely a starter, correct?
Could be, but not projected as one right now. But he's not probably going to be far from starter minutes if he's not already there.
All right. Duncan Robinson is going to be a rotation player, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We've had the starter conversation with him. One way or another, I've made the case he's got to play 25 plus minutes. I think you and I both agree, right? So we're gonna put him in that mix regardless. Caleb Martin, from what you've seen so far this season, I'm not talking about last season. I'm talking about this season. Core rotation player.
Yep. And I'm not saying that it's been perfect all season, so I don't want people to get that twisted. Like he's had his ups and downs, but I think especially as of lately, that perimeter defense has been coming back, and I think more specifically, he's been good in that press and in the zone. And I still think he's a guy that Spo is going to trust to do that job on defense, and that's the most important thing for him because he can just kind of slot him into that role. And now, of course, DeLon being here is going to change that, whereas like he might not need to throw a forward out there to do that role, but I still think of Caleb as a rotation player. Yeah.
All right, Kevin Love, core rotation player.
Yep, just because somebody has to come in when Bam sits.
All right, so we're at 7. Okay, Terry Rozier, when healthy, core rotation player, correct?
Starter and at worst rotation player, but most likely starter. So yeah.
Okay, so we're already at 8. So I did this exercise for a reason because I want people to kind of understand the depth that Spo is playing with right here. We're already at 8 guys that we are saying are rotation players. Like there's no deviation from any of that. There's no equivocation. There's no any other kind of ation. They are core rotation players, 8 guys, and typically in the playoffs, Erik Spoelstra plays 8 or 9. That has been his norm. It's typically during the season he plays 9. During the big 3 years, we always talked about now when Haslam was starting at the 4 along with Chalmers and the big 3. The bench was the same every night. You knew what it was. You knew when they were coming in. You knew who they were coming in with. It was Ray Allen, Shane Battier, Norris Cole, and Chris Anderson. That was it. Mike Miller and James Jones were useful players. They didn't play a lot unless Dwayne was hurt. Like that's pretty much the way that played out. He played 9. Joel Anthony got shelved to the bench during that period of time when Birdman came in, and Joel had been a starter on the team. So Spo will make the tough decisions and make sure that he gets down to 9 guys, and then sometimes 8 players in the playoffs. And then we've seen sometimes he gets to the point where he just trusts 7 once we get to the very end of it. And that's a Riley trait. But again, Spo's not the only one. So if those 8 guys, here's what I think we need to look at. Here's the other guys in this pool. You got Josh Richardson whenever it is that he comes back from the separated shoulder. You've got DeLon Wright, who you're adding, but has a very specific skill set, point of attack defense, that they need. You've got Nikola Jovic, who has shown tremendous promise when he's been unleashed, when he's been put in situations to succeed, and particularly with the ball in his hands. Is there anybody else that you could see? And I guess the other one would be Haywood Highsmith, okay? Who as a defensive part-time player, but has been a starter at times this season, and they had a lot of success winning with him as a starter early on. So we're at 8. We've got 4 guys there. Let me go through the rest of the roster so we can just eliminate. We don't think Jamal Cain has done enough to show himself as a rotation player, correct?
No.
Okay. Orlando Robinson, same, right?
Probably not. The most you could absolutely say, because I think this is something that we're probably going to get into is, like if we're projecting into the playoff rotation, and Orlando's probably not going to be in it. But what we did see last year was it wasn't just Bam and Kevin Love in their big man rotation. Mm-hmm. It was Cody Zeller. So there's a world where he plays a third big. I'm not expecting that to be Orlando, but that's like the case, right?
More likely that third big would be Orlando Robinson or Thomas Bryant.
Oh God, I hope neither, but I would hope for Orlando.
Me too. But we've seen him play Thomas Bryant, so that's why I'm throwing
Maybe he
it out
just
there.
eliminates. Maybe he just eliminates that, like, as because I think that was something that I think frustrated a lot of people. As you know, as the playoffs got later and later, is that Zeller kept playing, and maybe he just eliminates those whatever it was 6-7 minutes, and it's just a little bit more for Bam, a little bit more for K Love. I'm not sure exactly how he goes about it, but that is a question that's gonna have to be answered at some point later on.
All right, and the two-way guys, Swider. We obviously Alondas Williams had a terrific All-Star weekend. He's somebody we want to see a little bit more here, but we don't think he's going to project in the rotation this season, at least not once everybody's healthy. So we wouldn't anticipate that those guys would be in the mix there. All right, so we've got 8. We're gonna when we come back from the break now we're gonna deep dive on this because now we're gonna look at who gets the minutes the rest of the regular season when everybody's healthy, and then who would get them? How is it possibly tweaked if they get New York, if they get Boston, if they get Cleveland, if they get Milwaukee, and then if they saw, and I think this is where the third big thing comes in, if they saw Nikola Jokic or someone like that on the other side. So we'll get into that on the other side of the break. We do want to mention another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's Rock Esports Lounge. It's based in Palmetto Bay. We do our 2K tournaments there. We're going to be doing another one along with a watch party for the OKC game. So be on the lookout for that. Join our group down there. We have a great time down there. It's just a good location. They got plenty of parking. Everybody's there is having fun. They're playing video games all day long. If you mention 5 Reasons, you get the all-day pass, which is typically $25. They'll take $5 off. You can play there all day long. It's a great place to take the kids. It's a great place if you still feel like a kid. It's a great place if you're just bad at 2K like I am and you want to get beat while you're using the 2013 Miami Heat and you're playing against the current Detroit Pistons. Whatever it is you want to do, check it out. Miami's first esports center and lounge. It's ROK. That's ROK Esports Center, Rock Esports Center. Check them out in Palmetto Bay. And again, you'll be hearing a lot more about our next tournament as we get closer to it. All right, rest of the regular season here. Josh is out for at least another couple of weeks. So in the interim, let's assume Rozier's return in the next week or so. Are we looking at
Do we aggregate that?
Well, I don't want to aggregate anything these days, but are we looking at a 9-man rotation with DeLon Wright being the 9th and Highsmith and Jovic not being in the rotation? Because right now you're looking Bam, Jimmy, Tyler, Jaquez, Duncan, Caleb, Love, Rozier, and then your 9th would be DeLon Wright in Josh's place. Or we saw Josh briefly out of the rotation. Could we see a scenario where Highsmith is the 9th, or maybe even Jovic is the 9th, or maybe he even plays 10?
It's so hard to say, and not to say it as a cop-out, but I'm just going to break down why I feel like it's so hard to say, because I was trying to think about like the patterns that we've seen, and there's been like so many changes throughout the season. Of course, a lot of them were like circumstantial based on injuries, but if we're doing the scenario where Terry is back, I completely understand why your first instinct is DeLon in for Josh, because I feel like that was kind of the last rotation we saw when the team was healthy, right? Before Jimmy had his leave of absence, Haywood was the guy who was phased out. But like you mentioned earlier in the pod, Haywood was a starter for a good amount there. Jovic is a guy who has kind of only played if he starts, right? Like he's one of those guys who gets thrown in as a starter. And I think Spo has probably, been pleased with what he's seen as of late. So he has a great case to make. Josh was playing very, very well, before he was out. So if you just want to say like DeLon in for Josh because it's a kind of a similar position, a similar role, and I talked about this on playback the day of DeLon signing. Big fan of the signing and big fan of what he can bring here because it's kind of exactly what they needed there. A guy who can be plugged in right away. He knows exactly what he's going to do, but he is kind of more fit for the role that they've been trying to put Josh in all season, right? Like DeLon is kind of exactly that. It's like he is more of a ball handler and more of a point of attack defender than Josh. I'm not trying to hate on Josh by any means. I think Josh is just more kind of like a natural wing who can handle here and there, right? But DeLon is more of a natural guard and ball handler. than Josh is. And I think Josh is, you know, if you want to talk about the nuances, Josh is a little bit probably better in the mid-range and has that a couple of those shots in the short mid-range area that he can go to and whatever. DeLon is somebody that I think the Heat can kind of slot into that role right away. But Haywood is a guy who has kind of been their second best defender, you can say, for most of the season. And if you're looking at that rotation that you just mentioned there with DeLon, it's kind of missing, I think, one more wing. And so I think Haywood has a really good case that you can make. So as of right now, with this scenario, like I do think they're going to plug DeLon in to see how he fits. But I'm not sure that we're going to get an answer on that rotation. And I'm sure Spo is going to comment on it as we come back here about like how he's not going to be set on a rotation, you know, since guys are missing right now. And I feel like it's going to kind of be an open-ended question going forward.
Let me throw this at you, and then we'll get to the different matchups of this. Do you see any scenario where Josh Richardson and DeLon Wright end up in a rotation together?
I can see it. I mean, I just think Spo really likes Josh, but obviously the injury is gonna factor into all this and how he looks when he comes back. I mean, I could see it. It's probably not my preference. And again, it's not to hate on Josh. It's you've got another guard in the room, so maybe one has to come out. And you know, they obviously were needing guards before. They have 2 point guards now, right? After only having one 37-year-old who you know we weren't sure still wanted to be here, they have 2 point guards now, so things are a little bit different.
Well, we were sure he didn't want to be here, but yes, you're right. It's a little bit different. It is funny how sometimes they'll pivot where, no, we're positionless. We don't need this. We don't need this. And now, oh, it's so great that we have point guards that can actually do the things that point guards are supposed to do, like break you down off the dribble and get into the paint and guard the point of attack. I mean, it's a little bit odd. I'm not used to seeing it over the past year. Let me give you this then. So I think he just slides in DeLon Wright for Josh. Now, I think once he gets him up to speed, I don't think it'll be Josh's minute count though. And that's why I think he will play 10 for a little while. I think that he will play either Jovic or Highsmith, depending on matchup. Again, this is once Rozier is back. Until Rozier is back, honestly, there is room for Jovic. There is absolutely room for Jovic.
If he plays 10.
And I think if he plays 10, and I think that it's possible he could start Jovic out of the break. And I think that is, in a lot of ways, again, depending on whether Terry's back, is kind of it's a telling decision if he comes back and starts Jovic. Because that means he's had the whole All-Star break to think about this, to look at what Nico did over sort of the last month when he's gotten his opportunities and said, you know what? Down the stretch of this thing, when we get, you know, I'm assuming Jimmy back too. When we're making this push with Jimmy, we're trying to stay out of the plan. I'm going to trust the kid. If he makes that decision coming out of the break, Nico might have a long leash the rest of the way, because that to me means that the study's been done on this. He's had the time to sit back, look at it, evaluate it, and decide to stay with it. I'm not expecting it necessarily from the start, but I do think Rozier's absence and Josh's absence, even with Wright here, gives Jovic the opportunity to get some minutes. All right, but let's project this forward.
It is almost like helpful for the I mean, sorry to interrupt. It's almost helpful for the rest of the regular season, right? Because it's like, I mean, not that it's a good thing in any way, but it's like when you're missing Jimmy, Rozier, and Josh, now you have time to see DeLon play with some of the other guys. You have time to see a little bit more Jovic, maybe a longer evaluation period with some more reps. So I think you know, it's a good point you're making there.
All right, so let's get to matchups in the playoffs. Okay, let's assume health, which you can never do, but let's assume they have everybody. They got a first round series against the Knicks. Okay, and they have a first round series against Cleveland. Let's look at those two matchups here. Against Cleveland, if they're going to start Mobley and Allen, obviously Garland and Mitchell in the backcourt, and then you got Okoro and Strus and others there kind of at the wing spots. Do you think Jovic has a better opportunity to start in that scenario, or do you think that Spo would still size down with someone like Caleb, let's say, or Highsmith? But I think in that case it might be more likely Caleb. Which direction do you think he would go?
I mean, honestly, like it's so tough to tell because I also have to know what the backcourt is. Are we assuming that it's Terry and Tyler still?
I'm assuming that until further notice. I don't think that
Okay,
they
just
flipped the
making
first
sure.
round. I think it's important that you ask that question because I think it's important that we answer it. I don't think they flipped a future first-round pick for Terry Rozier and saw the things that he was doing, even if he was struggling with a shot, and are now going to convert him into a six-man. I could see a scenario where he comes back and they maybe limit his minutes and he comes off the bench at first, but I think the goal will be to put him back in the starting lineup. And I've said this over and over and over. No matter how fans feel about it, Tyler Hero is going to be a starter for the rest of this season. So you can aggregate me, clip that, do whatever you want with it. They're not putting Tyler on the bench. So let's just assume Rozier and Hero the rest of the way.
All right, so my first instinct is to say Kevin Love is back to a starter because we saw that in the last playoffs where it's like, okay, we're playing a big team. We're playing K Love right next to Bam. And he had a lot of great moments and pretty sustainable play, in my opinion. I don't think it was just hot shooting. And of course, like if the shooting is not there, maybe it doesn't look as great. We've mentioned that before, but I think that's an option they can still go to. But like you said, I wouldn't be 100% surprised if Spo just went with the small ball thing. And what I thought you were going to say was the more likely option is Haywood there, just because he's a little bit stronger than Caleb, and he would probably be the one. Actually, I'm not sure because maybe you could have Jimmy just guarding Mobley, and I think they can definitely get away with that. And maybe that's a way that you can get, just a little bit better perimeter defense as opposed to having K Love get attacked in pick and rolls over and over in the starting lineup by Garland and Donovan Mitchell. So I think you can kind of go both ways there. And if you start Haywood and have him on Mitchell, you have Terry guarding Darius Garland, you have Tyler guarding Strus, and then you have Jimmy guarding Evan Mobley. I think you can get away with that, right? Like I don't think Mobley is gonna punish Jimmy too often for it to be like, okay, we got to completely change it. I may be wrong there because it's a long playoff series, so maybe they scheme ways to make it better where it's just like you have Mobley screening all the time and Jimmy is constantly having to deal with Mobley's size down low. But if they just have Mobley spacing all the time, that's gonna fit right into the Heat's game plan because Jimmy could just sag off of him. They're gonna have to scheme ways to get Mobley down there, taking advantage of that, maybe off of putbacks and things like that. They can get away with it, and I think you can kind of say that for other teams as well, kind of with the Knicks, right? That was my initial reaction was they go back to K Love, but I felt like this last year too. I think they can get away with playing Haywood in that starting lineup if they wanted to. Like the Bucks is a different
that's
story.
assuming Randall. That's assuming Randall returns at the 4, and Mitchell
That
Robinson
is
or
a big team
Hartenstein
though,
is playing the 5. They are,
because
but
now
I'm
they've
talking
got
about both
OG
those.
and Bojan.
I know. I mean, the only place they're small is at the point guard position, where obviously Miami is kind of small too. But like I'm bringing those teams up because those are very possible first round matchups. Like, I mean, the Heat could be 6, and either of those teams could be in the 3 spot. One of those teams could be 2. I mean, right now, one of them is 2, and Miami could be coming out of the play-in at 7. All right, so let's go to the other 2 teams, though. Philadelphia is just hard to gauge. I'm not really going to get into them because, again, we don't know what they're going to look like when Embiid's back or if he's back and any of that kind of stuff. We've seen how Miami's matched up with them before, and obviously they need to put a plan together for Maxey. I would think against Philly, DeLon Wright will play. That's why I think like people are like, well, this is just a buyout signing. It is just a buyout signing, just like K Love was a buyout signing, but it is a buyout signing that, just like K Love, addresses a specific need that they have in the playoffs, and that's why DeLon's minutes. It's going to be. I'm curious to see how much he plays, but I think they're going to get a long look at him to see, okay, can we use him on Maxey? Can we use him on Brunson? Can we use? I mean, you look at the Eastern Conference. Can we use him on, to frustrate Drew and Derek White?
It's every good
these
team.
Every good team has elite guy, and Dame,
Trey,
by the way.
Halliburton, Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Like you almost, I think the only teams like where it's not like a huge problem, in my opinion, is the Magic and even the Celtics, because
Yes.
like Drew and Derek White are very good players, but it's not quite the level of these all-star point guards. But they're kind of everywhere
We've seen
though.
them run a whole bunch. We've seen them run a whole bunch of different combinations of the Magic. I think Jimmy's missed 2 of those games. They've won. They won at least one of them without Jimmy, I believe. So like that's a different kind of team with Franz and with Boncaro, but they're not as quick. They're not. They're. I still feel like the Magic are a piece or 2 away. But you're right. The other teams all have that. Let's look real quick before we close here. We appreciate our sponsors, Rocky Sports Center, and also Water Cleanup of Florida. Milwaukee and Boston. Okay, so I mean, to get to where you need to go, you're going to have to beat one or two of them again, regardless of the Bucks' struggles of late. Against the Bucks, I do think DeLon Wright has a role, not as a starter, obviously, but we've seen Brook Lopez has kind of gone the other direction this year. Chris Middleton is not as effective. Does that affect what you do? Because they've thrown Highsmith on Giannis in the past. Obviously, Bam gets a lot of reps against Giannis. I mean, that one year it was Crowder. They don't have someone quite like him again. Caleb kind of, I don't like that matchup with Caleb on Giannis. But what do things look like against Milwaukee and then against Boston?
I definitely don't like the Caleb on Giannis matchup ever. But no, it's really interesting to try to brainstorm because, and again, not to keep going back to shout out the deuces, it could go either way because you can go about it a couple of different ways when it comes to how you guard the Bucks, right? And you mentioned the different looks we've already seen. The last time we played them, you had Jovic guarding Brook Lopez, right? And just to serve into like kind of it fits into what we were talking about before with the two big stuff where Jovic can fit in there. I think because of that, like if he just feels like Jovic can start next to Bam there and like hold up enough versus a Brook, because Brook will have his way for with him in certain things like in the post or off of putbacks. Like he with as tall and how much size Jovic has, like Brook Lopez is a giant out there. So I think you can get away with it for spurts here, and that's probably what it would be if Jovic started, because I know he wouldn't be coming off the bench as a backup five, and we've already seen Spo's hesitancy to bring him off the bench in the first place. Because I do think you can try that and have him come off the bench and either play with Bam or maybe some spot minutes with K Love. We've seen him able to do that already, but so I think that's where Jovic can kind of fit in, and that's why I feel like it is so matchup dependent, because you look at the teams we've been talking about the past few minutes here, the Bucks, the Cavs, the Knicks, all these teams have size, and it's funny because the team with like one of the teams there with the two bigs is probably the smallest one, but even then, like the Bucks' entire perimeter is small, so it's like there's different types of size, whereas like the Knicks, like you said, it's only Brunson who's small. So it's different problems that you're solving out there. And if it's against Giannis and Lopez, like if you're gonna have Bam matched up onto Giannis, somebody's got to take on Lopez. So it's probably gonna be one of Love or Jovic, because I don't think he would even throw, for as crazy as Spo is sometimes, I don't know if he would throw Haywood onto him as a primary matchup. And I do think Haywood is a guy who is going to factor in here. I think DeLon is a guy like we just went through because of all the different point guards is going to factor in here. And I guess like where I end up feeling like is like I want to say Jovic would be the one phased out because he's only played when guys have been out. But like I just went through, they have certain matchups they could use him for. And
What
I
about
don't
the
think
Boston
there's gonna
matchup? What
be
about the Boston? What about the Boston matchup for him?
for
Because you talk
Haywood.
about two bigs, they're not going to start Porzingis with
No.
Horford, but they're going to play Porzingis with Horford, right? So are
Yeah,
you
there
are you
are.
comfortable with K Love? With K Love, if you put K Love out there with Bam, I feel like K Love can hang with
Yeah.
and look, Porzingis did some things to Bam last time that Bam's going to have to clean up. But like I feel like Love and Horford, you're talking about similar aged players. I mean, we know where Al's going to be. They fill very important roles for their teams. But again, you're not worried about Al killing you. He may have a game from three against you. But I mean, I assume you're going to have to play some two bigs there. But we've also seen Caleb continues to play well against them. It wasn't just
And
the Eastern Conference Finals. He played well against them the last time they were down here.
it's so tough. Like again, like the last time we saw them play, there was so many minutes out there, and I was frustrated watching this. Just like K Love was out there against two big lineups, and I think that's just because of like that's just the way that the rotations were that night. I think that type of stuff will probably change. Like if they were to play each other, right? Maybe it is double bigs, or maybe not. Maybe he just sticks to one big, and we go into the zone so that it isn't like a small guy matched up the whole time and getting easy putbacks. But then again, if you're zoned with a small team against two bigs, there's probably a lot of chances there for offensive rebounds. So there's no easy answer. I think the logic tells you for those minutes he plays two bigs, but Bam is playing so much more that I feel like that probably will be the case. But with Spo, you just never know. I really do think, and this is why I said at the top of the show that the scheme maybe matters less. It's just because I feel like we kind of know already with the schemes. It's just about when he pushes these buttons, because we've seen him throw out all of these things already. The shape shifting zones, the press into the shape shifting zones, and how often he's using and the thing is with Spo is that he kind of goes on and off. Like he'll use it for a couple of quarters, doesn't start the game in zone, but maybe like the second and third quarters are in zone, goes back to man in the fourth. And to me, like all of this stuff is, we know how they look when they drop. We know how they look when they switch. And it's more to me just about what guys you have out there. And that's probably going to dictate the scheme more than anything else. It's just, I really like after doing this whole exercise, I find myself more confused about who is actually going to be there at the end.
I guess here's the question, and we'll finish with this. I mean, obviously, we talk about Porzingis, who was a huge problem for them in the last game. But it comes down to Tatum and Brown to a certain degree, right? So, who is your primary Tatum defender in their rotation?
Jimmy, Haywood. Okay. Those are probably their best options. I'm sure, like it won't just be them, like because if it's
Jimmy and Haywood, then you are playing smaller, right? Because then you're probably playing Haywood at the 4. You're not playing Haywood at the 3 and Jimmy at the 2. I know Sean Rogers is going to get on me about doing position numbers here, but I mean the reality is if you're gonna put Haywood on Tatum, which they've done, then and Jimmy on Jalen, which they've done a lot. Then
Caleb starting on Jalen and Jimmy on Tatum.
Could be that too. It could it could be that also. It also could be Jaquez on Jalen a little bit. I'm curious to see kind of how that plays out. I don't know that he put him on Tatum that much, but he might. And and then we're gonna get back as we close to this. Do you see in any of these scenarios situations where Tyler, who we know is going to get hunted to a certain degree, it's just the nature of it. Okay, and Duncan's going to get hunted to a certain degree, although I feel like less than Tyler. Where even in a matchup against Boston, you might look at DeLon Wright minutes against Derek White, who has given Tyler problems in the past.
No, I think that's actually the matchup where you probably need DeLon the least, just since they don't. I mean, again, Drew and Derek White are very good players. They all probably still have nightmares about that Derek White putback, and just he's a heat killer, even though he didn't play well against them last time. But to me, he's not on. Those guys are not on the level of the other all-star point guards in that bracket, and I feel like DeLon is kind of like he's a specialty player in that sense, where he might still be in the rotation. I'm not saying he can't be, but maybe the Celtics matchup to me is more about matching up with them and knowing what game plan you're going to have against them. And DeLon can factor into it. I'm very interested to see who is more of a situational player and who is a staple in the back of their rotation. Because I don't, that's where I feel like it's all going to be open-ended and maybe matchup based. And I sorry if that sounds like a cop-out, and I'm really trying to go through it.
But that's why I did the exercise. But that's why I did the exercise at the beginning, because I guess the question becomes, are any of their top 8 play off the floorable? Okay. So we know Bam and Jimmy are not, but the question becomes, are any of the other 6, where one of these guys in this next bracket is Tyler, is Jaquez, is Duncan, is Caleb, is Love, is Rozier, are any of those 6 guys potentially replaceable in a particular series where you see more of Josh, or I almost said DeLon, or Jovic, or Highsmith, because it feels like we're going in with the idea, okay, they've got 8, and then they've got these 4 specialty players. And look, when I look at their specialty players, and Josh is not really specialty, but I think you know what I'm getting at here. When you look at Josh and DeLon and Jovic and Highsmith, this team is much deeper than last year. Like we should stop having that conversation. Like, I mean, Spo was trying to get. Well, it is, but Spo was trying to get it done with. He was trying to get it done with nothing last year. I mean, we can talk about having Strus and Vincent, but you're right. There were Cody Zeller minutes in there last year. K Love was not playing at the level that he's played at this year. They didn't have Rozier. Caleb is not where he was last year, but he's sort of rounding into form. Duncan is playing at a much higher level this year than last year. They didn't have Jaquez, and they didn't have Tyler. So for anybody who's going to talk Strus Vincent, I just gave you 6 names of guys who either weren't here, were hurt, or were not playing at this level. And that doesn't include Josh, DeLon, Jovic being an option. Highsmith was an option last year, or they didn't play him late. This team is considerably deeper than last year. And the question, again, just becomes in which matchup who he uses. And I think what we're going to see a little bit over the last 25 is that you're going to see him tinker with some of these things so that when they go into a first round series, he's going to know, okay, this is going to be my ninth for the majority of the series. And I think ultimately that and closing, we talk about closing a lot, matters a lot more than who starts. The only reason that the starting thing means anything is because, again, he doesn't play Jovic if he doesn't start. But beyond that, and Duncan plays better as a starter. But for the majority of the issues here, it's about which guys he's going to play beyond the 8, whether the 8 are a firm 8, and who's going to close. And I think that the closing could change night to night. Like I feel like looking at the closing, it's going to be Bam, it's going to be Jimmy. I'm not willing to bet on anybody else. I think it's going to be Tyler in most situations, but I think now that he's got a little bit more at his disposal defensively, there may be matchups where it's just like, we got to control Dame. We just got to control Dame. Like we got to control Maxey, and I'm going to give DeLon Wright some minutes out there as long as I can get enough scoring out there of Bam and Jimmy from others, maybe from Hawkins, maybe from Duncan, etc., where maybe Tyler is not a given. But I think Tyler in most cases is going to be out there as a closer, and I do think he's absolutely going to be a starter. But I mean, we've just given you 12 playable players, and that doesn't get to the third big thing, which to me, that's a Jovic or Embiid problem. Like other than that, I don't really see
Jokic
doing a whole lot. Jovic. I should close there. All right. Thanks for following. Check out the episode I did with Brady on more of the scheme-related stuff, although we touched on some of that stuff here. We'll have more episodes throughout the week. We are going to post an episode. I did some interviews about Duncan Robinson about a month ago about his resurgence this season. Now he's playing well again. I think we're going to roll that out in pod format. We are going to roll it out in pod format. I did interviews with Duncan, Bam, Kevin Love, and Spoelstra, all exclusive interviews, and we're going to put that out this week before the team officially starts its post-All-Star break schedule. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.